Hey, what's the saying? God, family, then business. So you got to have that family component.
100%. Yeah. It's so hard for many today because, it's like the crisis of the business itself is always pulling them in. And it's like, you have to have the boundaries, you have to have the discipline, or else there's always something,
If you don't, I mean, we're in a health pandemic and a civil pandemic. If you're not, keeping those balls in line, like, life, family balls, business balls, you don't want to break any, that family one, because you're, driven so much where you're not slowing down to know that your family needs you, or your friends, or your, whoever needs your support too.
So I have a question for you, so we're recording now, but I love that actually. So how did you arrive at that? Was that something that, you had was there an event that happened that said, hey, I need to put the family first, or did you sort of feel yourself just being totally off balance, or is it just a core value that you've always had?
Well, first off, I think work-life balance is I think we all try to achieve that, and I could always do better. So I want to be clear on that, because sometimes even though you're home, your mind's not.
Yeah.
So I think there's a word called being present.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's the thing that we all struggle to do better at, is of being present, because when you have big businesses and big lives, it's hard to kind of just, okay, I'm shutting it off.
Yep.
And, especially in this time with so much going on in this world, and if you're leading things, you have to show up too. You have obligations to show up for people or organizations. So that balance, I think, will go on. And, for driven people, I think it'll be you always will find a different challenge to go and do something. So that is what it is. But yeah, I think the one thing Gary Keller talks about, you have these balls, and, like business and some things are rubber, marriages and family are glass. And if you mess around with those, they break.
Yeah, I love that.
You can bounce that ball, you can lose money and make it back, but when you throw that family one, and that sucker will break. And sometimes you can't glue it back together, and that's what we see in society, right, with families and broken marriages, and that's what we don't want.
Well, what would you say? What is it that you do, or what do you consciously do to keep that sort of family ball right where it needs to be? Just again, I have a lot of entrepreneurs and executives that listen to this show that are always looking for tips from people that are doing it and living it and have dealt with some similar issues, like trying to find that balance. What is it that you do?
Well, I think for me, it's marry the right person.
Okay.
I married the right person that allows me to do my thing, but checks me when it's time to be dad or husband. Because at the end of the day, with business, right, you have accountability partners, and people that tell you, hey, you need to do this, or this is time to do that. I think my wife does a good job of saying, hey, you need to do this, you need to focus on this, you got to remember this. So I have a good partner. And listen, my kids too. I mean, they'll tell me, hey, Dad, you were on the phone a little bit too much today. You need to, and they check me. They're like, and I'm like, okay, you're right. I'm like, you know what, you guys are right. So I want them to have a voice, and I'm happy that they call me on it. Because sometimes, listen, entrepreneurs are very similar. We got that high, like, let's go, let's change the world, let's change the business, let's be growth, profitability.
Let's do it now.
Your kids could give a kitty. At the end of the day, they want your time. Yeah. And if you married the right person, I think your wife, she wants to have nice things, but she probably just as much wants you there and being present. So that juggling act, I think will go on as long as you're married, and as long as you have children, and as long as we're human. Your mom, your dad, your siblings, someone will want you to remember them and pay attention to them. So I think that's something we all could do better, and we got to be conscious of it at all times.
Totally. I'm with you on that. I've seen a lot of ball players struggle over the years because they have so much going on off the field. It's a mess off the field. They're great players on the field, but eventually they become poor players on the field because of the mess that's going on off it. So I'm with you 100%. I love that. So diving into your career a little bit, it's, you're a bit of a Renaissance man. You've done a bunch of different things, as I did my John Clidy research. So you started in law enforcement, but I'm sure as an entrepreneur, that was I'm sure you did things before that too that gave you signs that you were an entrepreneur.
Yeah, my dad was he had a business and still has a business. He passed away, but my brother runs it. And, we always had that, independent mindset by watching him and his work ethic. So I always, was around that type of, environment. So I seen that environment and I liked it. I didn't like the work he did. I didn't like the roofing aspect.
Okay.
But I liked the concept of controlling my destiny.
Yeah.
I did that, which is odd that I went to become a New Jersey State Trooper.
Yeah, I was going to say it's sort of opposite, but what brought you to that? Was it the, sort of the old line about a pension back in the day? I know that was a pretty, common thing that drew people to certain career paths like law enforcement or working for the post office or whatever it may be.
Yeah. It's odd when you're in a virtual thing and people would just walk around. So
I'm used to it. Don't worry about that.
So, actually, I know it sounds really simple, but I was a college football player in Montclair State, and the test came out that you can be this driven, $50-some thousand salary, and you can change the world, and whatever it said, it was like I'm like that's me, and a couple other guys, we want the most athletic, the smartest, the captains of the football teams. So it was like, yeah, you know what? That sounds like something for me. And, it was anyone that knows the New Jersey State Police at the time, it was the most decorated law enforcement, agency in the world. And so we applied and eventually got the job. And, it was 6 months living in Seagirt. I don't know if anybody knows, you kind of live there and it's paramilitary. So it's a very,
wow.
They say it's like, the Marines, like very, like that type of process, but it kind of taxed your mind and your physicalness. It was one of those things, why not? I think I can do it. I'm physically fit. I think I'm intelligent enough to take on this task. And it was a great experience. I'll never, regret the opportunity to do that for the 17 years that I did.
And what point did you start to shift where you really started to get the entrepreneurial bug sort of maybe again? You saw it as a kid watching dad, but at what point in your career did it start to bite you again?
As I remember, I was starting. We had shift work, so you got some time there. I don't know if anyone ever done it, but 10-hour shifts were great because we had a decent amount of time off, and then on the certain shifts, like you really have like all day till like 2 o'clock or so to do something, and I was just sitting around. Like, I'm not like a video game guy, or I like to work out, but I work out real early in the morning. So it was like, I was just like, I got to do something else. Like, I'm not going to just sit and just do this. So I got my real estate license. Before you know it, the small independent that I worked for, he was flipping houses. And I was like, oh, interesting, and he owned 40, 50 houses. And I started watching that. So I bought a little inky dinky, $30,000 row home, and that had a Section 8 tenant.
Yeah.
And I started with that one, and before you know it, I didn't have a lot of money, so I borrowed some money from Dad,
Yep.
I wrote a book and talked about it, but I borrowed some money from him, and then we borrowed another little one. And before you know it, I think FHA or whatever, Fannie Mae allowed you 10 homes at 100% financing,
Wow.
at the time. So in the early 2000s, so I was just buying as much debt as I could,
Yeah,
like,
right.
hey, bring it on.
Giving it to you.
I get the rental income. And then the market started to go, the market started to explode.
Yeah.
And I was a realtor and an investor. So I had a plethora of young state troopers with money and time. So they watched me, and I start saying, hey, why don't you do this? And, so as I started to, become not only just an investor, I became a decent agent, because now I'm doing a lot of volume because I'm doing it, then I got other people that want to invest.
Yeah.
So within 3-4 years, I'm doing like 70, 80 units a year as a trooper still.
Wow. So you were selling 70 to 80 units a year, and you had a full-time job. Wow. That's amazing, man.
Yeah. And I started holding and I started flipping. So I was like really getting into it. And that's kind of the transition this is starting to be like more than just a hobby.
Yeah. What called you to real estate? I mean, I have buddies that are in law enforcement. They have landscaping companies. They have, other sort of service-based companies. What was it that said, hey, John, come on over here to real estate. This is for you.
I remember buying my first house, and for some reason, the realtor just didn't give me good information. So I really did it more for the education than I did for being a salesman.
Okay.
And then when this is back when they had the book, it was the counties had the different books, and it was no computer, and you just look and say, oh, I like that house. And, so I remember that time. So, I was like, this is interesting. And I probably did one deal the first year, and maybe 3 to 4 the second year. I think the third year is when I really started to, maybe the second year I did like 10 or 15, but the third year, I think I remember doing 30. And that's when I was like, this is some real money. Like, I was like, wow. And the thing that I didn't even say in my book, but I recall that what happened was in Camden City at the time was one of the most dangerous cities in America. And there was only like one agent that even did business there. And I was like, I didn't have a lot of money. So the taxes were cheap there, and you can purchase a home, just like in some of the other areas that I purchased. And, for $20,000, $30,000, I can get, a house that I could put a tenant in and make a decent return.
Yeah, quick cash flow, or good, strong cash flow. Yeah.
Yeah. So I was okay with going into Camden City. And before you know it, agents were just giving me listings. They're like, I don't want it. You have it. And not even asking for referrals. That's how crazy it was. They were like, I don't even want the 25%. I'm like, really? Bring them on. And I was just, I had like 100 listings before I even opened my eyes, because no one wanted them. And I had buyers, and that's why I had to form a team. I just didn't have time to do it all. I was at 50 hours a week, minus as a state trooper. I was an investor. And, it was just not enough time. So that's why I had to even start the Clidy group, because I needed some help.
Yeah. It's so cool. I get a chance to talk to a lot of, entrepreneurs, and I was talking to a renowned artist today. Romero Brito is his name. And he's got a similar story in the art world, how it just started to happen, right? He put himself in a position, started doing what he enjoyed, had the passion, the enthusiasm, and it sort of just kept evolving. And that's why I appreciate your story, because I'm sure you had a plan, but it wasn't sort of that 5-year in-depth, everything scripted type plan, right? It was sort of
there was no plan. That's why I almost killed myself. There was no plan. Honestly, and I hate to be cliche, but until I really came to Keller Williams, I was very entrepreneurial. I wasn't purposeful towards anything. I was just, I'm assuming there was a talent and a work ethic that was really, passionate type of human being, but I didn't really start to implement systems till, maybe a year after I joined Keller Williams, almost eight plus years ago. And then I started to figure out models, systems, how to be a leader, how to track and set expectations and accountability. So yeah.
By that time, were you doing much more sort of team management than sort of that, in the trenches, guerrilla warfare by the time you started to,
Yeah, I was one of the top. I was at Century 21 first, and I was one of the top agents in the country in units sold when I was at Century 21. So when I transitioned to Keller Williams, I was, a top agent at the time, and I had administrative support. I had a team, and I started to leverage away from probably buying and selling to more leading and recruiting and growing. And that's when I went to Keller Williams to really launch my own market center, my own office.
Okay.
So yeah, I was kind of starting to more gear my life towards leadership development and leadership as opposed to buying and selling. I still love it, and I still I take more cherry pick clients that long-term clients or friends or families. I'll do that, but for the most part, I'm not like I'll let my team do their thing and I'll support them.
Yeah, no, that's cool. What advice would you have, as somebody now you've been sort of through the progression. What advice do you have for somebody young that's starting, that wants to follow in your footsteps? What are the first steps? What would you give as just some good, honest advice?
I put it in my book, Leaving Six Figures, in the back because it was so important to me. Was one thing I was really good at is making money. The one thing I was bad at is tracking it and paying attention to it.
Okay. Love that.
So I would say everything you spend, I would know and write it down and keep a journal or a ledger for 30 days. And I think a lot of people, when they do that, they realize, really how much money they make and how much they spend. So I think getting a grasp of just finances, I guess you would call it financial literacy. Yeah. I would get real smart about money and understand money. I grew up, my dad wasn't very educated, and my mom, I think she was smart, but, they didn't go to college and, academia. And, we were, hardworking family and, but I don't think I ever really understood budgeting and, having a concept of, this money goes to tax, Uncle Sam, this money goes to this goes to that, and then this goes to your future legacy fund or whatever that is. Right. So I think if I'm younger, I would really get real smart about money, read books about money, Rich Dad, Poor Dad, there's so many different, Daniel Ramsey, there's so many different, money around money and understanding money, I think, and tracking it and paying attention to it. I would do that before I do anything, because when I talk about when someone leaves a job like I did, 3 years shy of a pension for life, I tell folks that you couldn't do that unless you really knew how much money you make, how much money you need to make. If you're leaving the job, do you have a nest egg so you can figure out what you're going to do next and all that stuff? So same thing if you're starting off. I mean, what do I want to do? How much money do I have? How much money do I need? I think being smart about money is the best advice I can give anybody. And then hire someone really good accountant. I would spend more money on an accountant than you do on anything else, and have someone that really protects your money and your assets. And it might sound crazy starting out, but I wish I listened before, because I would hire any accountant. Just, how much would you charge me for my returns? Great. The least expensive option is who I go with.
Hired.
Now I would spend as much money, and I hope my accountant's not listening to this, but that's a bill worth, because usually they save you money in the end with the advice they give you, right? So I think just being smart about money, if I can tell you anything, because no matter, if you don't do that, then nothing else matters, right? If you're not smart about money, then it doesn't matter how much you make. There's multi-millionaire athletes, you've been around, that end up going broke because they didn't have smart financial, literacy to themselves. So if you're smart about money, there's a pretty good chance you're not going to lose your $200 million contract. You're right. Smart.
And I what I love about that is not a lot of people bring up money. Like, as you're talking about money, and it's not something that's spoken of, but I'm sure you've seen it in business for yourself, and even those that work for you, the fact that they don't have that financial literacy, what I say is it costs them the position of playing offense. They're already starting off in a defensive posture because they're trying to figure out how to live, and they're nervous and they're scared, and they can't just attack in an uninhibited way. So that's why I love that. It's not spoken of, even like the word money. It's like, hey, I'm glad John brought that up.
Well, the truth be told, I would be remiss not to say it here is, I'm co-chairing a social equality task force for Keller Williams now. And, part of, when you think about what's going on in the communities now is, we have to do a better job of bringing jobs and financial literacy and education into certain communities that, like I said, I'm even telling you, my situation, I wasn't as smart, as a minority male about money. So it's a big deal, and it's important to me, and having mentors that understand that. And that's a commitment that I'm going to have as someone running this or supporting the initiative inside my company. Is we're going to figure out ways to get funding and mentorship and recruiting and education through these communities. So, someone wouldn't wait till they're 30 some years old like I did to get smart about money.
So, when you had that moment in your mid 30s, was it the fact that, because I think a lot of entrepreneurs have dealt with this, they're saying, hey, I'm working hard, I'm doing really well, but where is all the money? Was that sort of the moment that you had where you're like, hey, I'm making money, but my account doesn't show that I'm making as much? And then you see
I would say, I still made money, and I had my 401ks and I had some savings. I think what I didn't realize is really tracking, even like the lunches and the coffees and the pharmacies. And, if you really start to like tracking what you spend, it's like, oh my God, like it cost me, I think at one point it really cost me like $14,000 a month to actually operate my life.
Yeah.
Like, so I would have to make 14,000. I have four kids. I didn't mention that. And, I bought the big house and the big cars, and, I got the shore houses and everything. So, for me, just to operate my house, I'm like, I need 14K, so, that'll make you think, how much passive money do I have coming in? What's offsetting that, and so I think just the understanding of what it costs for you to operate your life, that's not including anything fun. That's not including your vacations, your whatever the heck you want to do, your something happens to your pool or something, your car, you got that, so I think that's when I started figuring out like that, I'm like, wow, like, and then, you start having kids and you're thinking of college, and I'm like, I don't have as much money as I think I need to get 4 kids through college as I need to, if I want to do this or I want to do that. That's when the real, as much as I thought I had money, was it enough money if a pandemic hit, right? Or if something really bad hit, is it enough? And probably with 4 kids, it'll never be enough.
Right.
But I would say that I started to realize that I had to be smarter about money. I had to, and listen, how could you help others if you don't help yourself, right? If you're going to, lead leaders, you have to be able to be really smart about money so you can coach it and train it and all that. So, yeah, I mean, I started saying like, how am I built, financially? How am I able to give advice to someone when I'm not taking the advice myself? So I started looking at, yes, I know how to make money. And we talk about in our company, it's great that you make, that you gross all this money, show me how much you keep.
Yeah.
And that's what it's all about. How much are you keeping every year? Great, you made $2 million. That's awesome. Great job. But you only netted 200,000.
Yeah.
Bad job.
Like you said earlier, how many people build that life on debt, right? The whole thing is their whole life is debt. They're making all this money, but they owe more than they make. It's a bad, it's a bad situation, short and long term. And what's interesting is too, a lot of the CEOs that I work with, when the pandemic hit, the first thing they did was they went right to their P&L and they said, hey, where are we blowing money and where are we running fat? Because, through our own life and through business, it's easy to get fat.
Hey, the one of the cool stories I heard, we had Jeff Hoffman on a call yesterday, our regional call, and Jeff was the founder of Priceline.com. I don't know.
Yeah. Yep.
And he said that I think he had his nephew or someone, it was a 5-year-old, and he said, you know, what's a 5-year-old do? Is they ask questions, right? What's that? Why is that? Well, what's that? And he brought his 5-year-old nephew to his one of his businesses, and he uncovered that there was a machine there that they haven't used in 10 years, but they were paying for it.
Wow.
And because the 5-year-old asked the question, what is that? And he asked like 3 people until he talked to his CFO and said, no one knows what this is. Can you find out what this is? And they said, we found out it was like a printing press for something that we never used, but we still were paying for it.
Wow. Amazing.
So he was like, they have a day or, you know, once a month or whatever. It's, you know, act like a 5-year-old and question everything. Why is that? What's that? Why is that? And, you know, you think about if you're in a business, you know, question everything. You know, why are we doing that? Why is that there? What does that do? What's the return on that? You know, like just have a 5-year-old day.
That's really cool. I've never heard that before, but it makes total sense, man. I mean, how many of us have subscriptions running to companies that we don't even know if they're in business anymore, but they're still found a way to charge us?
Yeah, I told my wife the other day, like we have we have like 8,000 TVs in this house, and I'm like, all we do is watch Netflix.
Yeah.
Like, why do I even need this? You know, like, you know, and if I don't watch that, I'm reading, you know, so or on Audible. So I'm like, why do we even spend that money? Like, you know, so when you think about, if you really think about your life and what you use and don't use, I mean, you should really question, you know, everything. You know, like, why am I spending $30 a month for this when I never use it? Yeah, I use it once a year.
Yep, exactly. Yeah. People say, you know, it's only $30 a month. It's even like the Planet Fitness model. You know, it's 10 to 20 bucks a month. They know you're not going to come. You know you're not going to go, but you keep it on there. You may just have to have that talk and say, you know what? I haven't been there in 6 months. Haven't been there in a year. I'm not going. Let me get this thing off the reoccurring bill.
Absolutely.
Yeah, no, I love that, man. It's sort of taking that financial inventory. So
I think it's smart business. You know, I think anything you do, you know, and it starts at home and then it goes and trickles into your business.
Yeah. So what you know, I wrote a book last year called Habits of a Champion. What would you say are some of the daily habits that you have that you feel like allow you to be, let's say, Superman for your company? What are the things that you feel you need to do that sort of keep you even? It could be anything, you know, working out, praying, whatever it may be. I love to hear what keeps you going.
So, the total transparency, you know, I used to be this CrossFit guy and, you know, work out. I joke that I worked out for so many years and so long. I've been more, you know, I still get up early, but I don't work out as much. So I'm more like, you know, either meditate or journal. I have this little notepad that really just has everything I do when I do it. And, you know, I kind of really just plan my day every day. You know, who I need to call no matter what I need to do no matter what. And, you know, I might, and I'm kind of journaling another book. So I might just do maybe 3 or 4 paragraphs. I'm not putting a lot of pressure on myself right now because I'm doing so many other things.
Yeah.
Of just information around some thoughts that I've had in lieu of everything that's been going on. You know, and it's kind of a continuation of my Leaving Six Figures book.
Yeah.
But you know, journaling, meditation, you know, even just, you know, cute banter with my wife now in the morning, you know, where we just sit there and 15 minutes just talk about the day or about yesterday or about what we want to do the weekend. And, you know, we've been having consistent morning conversations or coffee, you know, where we just, you know, I think that's where I get real good when, you know, I get that 15 minutes or 20 minutes with my wife and we just get a cup of coffee. How's your day? How's the kids? What are we doing? And I think that seemed to get me really going well when I have that time with her where it's like, I'm not thinking about work. I'm not thinking about this. I'm not thinking about anything. It's just us just kind of talking about whatever the heck we want to. And usually it's just maybe about, something that we really like to do or something we really like to talk about.
That's cool.
Yeah.
The little personal grounding time.
Yeah. So, and we I think we get about 5 days in a week, which, definitely Saturday, Sunday, but, maybe 3 during the week that I get in with her where it's like, I'll fit in, like a 7:30 to 8-ish where we're just sitting there, just having our, now it's out on the deck, with the breeze and all that going. And sometimes it's walking to the beach, where we'll just sit there and meditate for like 10 minutes where we just don't do anything, don't think about anything, and let the thoughts go off into the ocean.
That's great, man. I love that. I love it that you have such a well-rounded perspective on leading yourself. And in turn, it's got to carry into those that you lead in the business as a whole.
I hope, I always try to, what's the 5 levels of leadership by John Maxwell, position, permission, productivity, and then people development is that 4th one where you start to develop them so that they become, the pinnacle or the leaders themselves. So, I mean, I'm big on that type of, that hierarchy of discipline around leadership.
Do you think that that's allowed you to, again, I'm not with you day to day, but feel at ease, like saying, hey, I have a company that's growing because I empower my people and it allows me to be at the shore with my family and not have that, I call it like entrepreneurial pressure. Like a lot of entrepreneurs, they're constantly feeling not just distracted, but they feel pressure.
Yeah, I don't have pressure like that anymore. I think when you financially get to a place where you make a decent amount of money, I think that there's always a pressure as a leader, especially for me leading like a big region. I think, you remove some pressures as you hit certain pivotal parts in your life, your development of life, whether it be financial, whether it be mental maturity or whatever. So I think the pressure I put on myself is something that'll probably never go away, which is the pressure to always do more.
Yeah.
You achieve, if Bill's saying you make your first 100,000, you're like, oh my God, when I get there, this is going to be great. And the whole world's going to just stop. And then you get that, or your first million or whatever. And I think, you always get hungrier on that chase to that goal.
Yep.
So, I don't know if I'll probably be, my wife will attest to it. I'll probably be an old guy still trying to go after it and grow something, because that's just how I'm built.
That's probably why you'll make it to be an old guy. They say when the man stops chasing, he can oftentimes stop breathing and stop living.
Yeah, I don't ever want to do that. So I'm going to keep chasing. If that's the saying, then I'm going to keep breathing. I'm going to keep chasing it. Yeah.
I love that, man. So I'm gathering. I always love talking to athletes that are in business. How much has that played a role, you think, in your just ability to push and persevere and lead and be a part of a team?
Yeah, I played sports all my life. Played basketball and football in high school, and played college football. Always been around teams. Always been around that competitive, I don't know, alpha male type of environment. I would say, if you haven't played organized, I was telling my kids all the time, like the sports alone are one thing. And, how many people are, you've been around, how many people are going to be professional athletes, right? I mean, what's 0 point some percent or whatever it is. However, I think the lessons that you get from being coached, being a leader on the team, whether, having a role that you have to, if it's a team sport, right? You have a role, no matter, I was an outside linebacker, or if you're a guard, you have a role on the team. And, if you don't do your job, there's a good chance that play or that thing will not happen, which in turn, if you keep doing it, you won't win.
Yeah.
So it's important that I think sports teaches you so much, and losing and winning teaches you, right? You can see how people behave in the loss. You see how they behave in the win. You see the great coaches, how they're so grounded, like what's my guy in Alabama?
Saban.
Saban, that really, they don't really go up or down. They just stay,
Yep.
they just stay that even keel throughout, and that's a special human being, because you always want to celebrate. And sometimes I find, even when my kids, I'm excited for them sometimes, but my mentality is, one win's great. Is when you win consecutive, when you continue to win is what I love to see, so, and then I can get where Saban is, all right, I won the championship. Now I'm like thinking, the minute they ran across and won, I'm like, okay, what do I need to do to get my team ready for next year?
Yeah. Yeah. Who do I have to bring in? All that. Yeah. Oh, winning's it's an addiction. Yeah. You win once, it's like Belichick, you want to keep winning.
And you can think about it, how it goes into business. You're the same way with business. You have one great bit, and that's why a lot of businesses fail, right? You have one great business, and then you go and try to expand too quick, or you don't have the right hire, or you didn't have the right team or the right systems, and then you start to see when you expand is when you see your weaknesses, or you see where you're inefficient.
Yeah.
And it starts to kind of show, and if you can't fix that gap or that hole, that's when you start getting into problems as a business. So it's the same thing in sports. Yeah, sports teaches you so much.
Yeah, no, it's the best, man. Discipline, attitude, all of it. So I did want to touch quickly on your book, Leaving Six Figures. Did you ever think you'd write a book? Was that in the cards for you? Or, I mean, usually guys with journals, you got so many thoughts. It's like, I got to put these somewhere publicly.
Yeah, I wrote a book years ago, and I hired a ghostwriter, and it just didn't turn out right.
Yeah.
It wasn't my words, and it just didn't sound right. And my wife said it perfectly. She's like, "What's your story?" And I'm like, "You're right. I don't even have a story. What did I was still a state trooper and a successful realtor. I think in my mind, I'm like, everyone's saying, oh my God, how did you sell like 200 homes and you're a full-time state trooper and you're flipping houses and you got 4 kids. So I kept hearing it, and I'm like, it's so odd. I guess maybe I should write about it, right? And then as I wrote it, it just didn't seem like it was a story. And I'm like, I don't even want to read it. Like the book sucks, I don't even want it. So, and that was in like 2007. And then when I became with Keller Williams in like 2012, and then I became a regional director in 2014, I started to fly back and forth to Austin, Texas.
Okay.
And, when I was on the plane, sometimes I would read or listen to an Audible, and then sometimes I started writing the story in my words.
Yeah.
So I started writing little like a little like 2 or 3 pages, and I would start off with like a story, like a cop story.
Yep.
And, and then I'm like, well, that sounds pretty cool. And then I would say, what's somebody famous that did something. And I would think about like, something that Zuckerberg did that is in alignment to what I did or how I did it. And then I would capture that moment, and then, go on to maybe a story about my family or about my dad. And, and then before you know it, I had like 50, 60 pages. And when I got to 100, I was like, I read it and I'm like, this is all over the place. It's like, there was no timeline. It was out of sync, and it just didn't flow. Yeah. And I had a friend of mine that just wrote a book, and I asked her, and I said, hey, what did you do? And she was like, I hired a book coach. I said, really? She said, yeah, they help you organize your ideas and chapters and everything. So I hired a coach, and, we met a couple times, and I gave her what I had. And then we started taking what I had and putting it in like chronological order. And then she would say, okay, you need to write more here because this is missing, or this is great, but we got to get this. And then I had so many iterations of this thing. I mean, I maybe 1,000,
oh my
iterations.
God. Wow.
But, and my mind is a lot better than my writing. So, to understand what I write, I can't even understand what I write. So, I would have to really look at it and dissect it and have someone help me, because my mind's saying it all really good. And I didn't record a lot either. I recorded some, but I mostly just it was a handwritten thought. And then and then it forced me to get cleaner on my thoughts.
Yeah.
And I started really working on an outline. And then then we really did it a chronological plan, and then I added I called it a workbook, you know, a workbook, you know, kind of a working book kind of, so you can have lessons. So I added some lesson plans and some questions. I put a budget in the back, as you know, what I mentioned earlier. So I really made it something that someone could use, and I did it because there's so many people out there that are in jobs that weren't happy. I mean, I mean, even troopers, cops, school teachers, you name it. They've come to me and said I was their inspiration, because they're like, you know, I'm sitting here for 8 years or whatever, and I'm in traffic, and I'm like, I don't want to do this, but I have to do it. Yeah. And I'm like, you know, I felt, you know, I had a great job, and, you know, I was 17 years in, but I wasn't happy. I was just like, kind of, you know, I was driving to Trenton for 2 hours in traffic. And, you know, I remember the straw that broke the back was, it was a snowstorm. That big snowstorm we had. I was literally in the car for 9 hours.
Oh my gosh. That'll do it.
The whole turnpike was like down, and I'm like, oh my God, I cannot, this is not for me. And it was like, a lot of those things happen a lot. You know, it was like traffic, accident, just a lot of things where it just wasn't meshing with it wasn't in alignment to who I was anymore.
I want to ask you just a quick question. Like you said, it's not alignment to who you were. Like, did you feel it like in your body? Because that's, I feel like that's how you know also, like when it runs deep, it's like, I got to get out of here, man. There may be gold at the end of this rainbow, but I'm not quite sure.
Well, listen, you know, put it in perspective, right? I was 3 years shy of getting, you know, almost a $70,000 check for the rest of my life. 3 years away. But, you know, I would drive there and I had this pit in my stomach, and I'm like, I got money now. You know, I own, you know, at the time I had, you know, 20 some rental homes. I had money in the bank. You know, I had some debt already paid off. And I had a successful office at the time. I was a Keller Williams office owner, and I owned a few of them. My team still does 100, and to this day we do 150 units or so a year. So I was okay. You know, I was like, I could leave, you know, and then I'm like, I gotta leave. Like, I have to leave. I don't, and then I started doing some math, and I'm like, okay, so I'm going to stay for 3 years to make, let's say $70,000, right, for the rest of my life. Well, I knew I wasn't going to stay till 25, which would give me maybe a little bit more money, but health benefits for life. So I said, what if I figured out a way to get health benefits through what I already do? And could I make up the $70,000 a year in flipping a home or taking on, you know, with the amount of time, you know, if I get 40 to 50 hours back a week, what could I do with that?
Ooh, yep. Good stuff.
Yeah. My profit share with Keller Williams is $70,000 a year now. Yeah. You know, and my profit share. So I really make that anyway. And then when I'm 55, you know, I'll be 49. When I'm 55, I get, you know, 35 or whatever % of my pension anyway. So. Yeah.
And two, I mean, you can't put a price on freedom, right? Just sort of, when you feel that pit in your stomach, just cutting that thing loose and being free is like, it's an amazing feeling. Well,
you got the flag behind you, right? You got that freedom, man. You know, that thing's whipping in the sky. You know, I definitely didn't feel like I had freedom at that point. No.
Yeah. Well, I think I also say too, like if you do have that entrepreneurial spirit, even though, you know, the police isn't a corporate job, but it kind of is, you still have a little bit of the handcuffs, and you want to be out there and flying on your own. And I know a lot of entrepreneurs too, they have a lot to prove to themselves, that they want to prove to themselves. They want to challenge themselves and test themselves. And you probably had to get out to just sort of, you know, it's kind of that burn the boats theory. I'm going to figure this thing out no matter what, because I'm going to bet on myself that I can.
Yeah, listen, when I did some research, I couldn't find anyone from 1921 when we started till when I left in 14 that left 3 years shy that didn't get, you know, fired, terminated, or something, you know, a really big reason that happened. They would leave shy of that. And when I left, I mean, so many people were like, you know, and some people, and I'm not saying, you know, this to some people all, get hurt on the job, but
Yeah.
there's a lot of people that get hurt and all of a sudden they're able to, do everything, but they got pensioned out, but yet they go and they have a full life and they're running marathons after that. I didn't want to go out like that. Anybody can go and say you're hurt and then, get your thing. I mean, I went out ethically, with integrity.
Cool.
And I went out and, I feel good about it. I don't have any regrets.
Yeah. You did it the right way. So what's next for you? I mean, you're doing what you're doing. You're doing it well. What's in front of you? What's a vision that you have for yourself right now?
It's crazy. I had this vision of doing all these things. And then when this incident happened with George Floyd and, when he was murdered, I really shifted my thought process on how I could support, a bigger mission, which is to change social equality around the country. So for me now, it's really how can I support the market centers and the regions and Keller Williams as a whole, where we can have funding for recruiting minorities in the real estate, where we could do all kinds of things in the community that we turn renters into homeowners. So I've shifted my thought on how I can have a bigger purpose in life than me just making a lot of money in businesses, to where I can maybe make a difference for society. So I'm working with some great people now that we're trying to figure out ways that we can do better to help the communities, to help our businesses. Right now we're going to help Keller Williams and inside our family, but we know that this would probably lead into other companies and other communities. So my commitment now is really to put together a team that including Gary Keller, who's 1,000% on board of this, and some other great leaders, the Minkidis and other folks in Keller Williams, that big supporter, big groups that really want to make a change in not just our company, but in society. So to me, that's the bigger purpose. So when we think about legacy building, one day when I'm not here, my kids or grandkids can say, Papa Clidy did some really cool things for this country. And so if I can do something that's a procedural or something that really stays long after I'm gone, to make some changes in this country, then I've done a good job.
Yeah, no, that's cool, man. That's soul work. It's working at a deep level. Once you have the topical stuff taken care of, it is what it is. That's the work that, that makes the biggest difference for a lot of people. It's generational work.
Yeah. And listen, I was a police officer, so I see that perspective too. So,
yeah.
I don't want to, not be aware that some really good police officers out there.
Oh yeah.
That do some great things. And, one or two bad eggs don't determine the whole carton that's in there. So, I don't want to leave that out. With some great officers out there. And I think we could do better just in education around everything, around that part of it, around the community part, around all of us. My family, I'm biracial, my wife's family and our family, we can do better just at home.
Yeah.
There's things that we can do, in telling our kids and how they behave and our friends, just having those hard conversations now.
Yeah.
That's where we're going to change. Someone said it perfectly the other day. It said, the way we make change is one relationship at a time.
Yep.
That's how we make change.
I love that. And also too, having, again, sort of going full circle, how we started, being home, being with your kids, teaching your kids, coaching your kids, you know what I mean? There's a lot of power in that. There's a lot of reward in that. And you're empowering them, to be their best. They're their best. They make somebody else be their best. And it's sort of that chain reaction,
Yeah. Well, that's the thing, most of us need to start at home, right? Like if you don't have great role models at home, those folks become leaders or employees or part of society. And if you don't do a good job there, then we get the fruits of whatever you put out to us, and that includes, if you have children, right? Whatever you put out, it's your responsibility what goes on here. I mean, obviously school, they don't have their teachers and things, but with mom and dad and grandmom and grandpa, the lessons that we give them will terminate throughout their life.
Exactly. But you're building their character
Yeah.
ultimately, which is really cool. So I got my last question for you, and I'll let you get back to the beach after this. I call the show the Becoming a Champion show, and I always ask, what does the word champion mean to you?
Well, after watching the Michael Jordan documentary, I think I'm feeling different about that word, what a champion looks like. But to me, I think it's someone that embodies the spirit to thrive. What's the book that Angela Duckworth, Grit?
Grit, yeah.
When I think of the champion, I think of that grit. Your flag embodies that. It's you can see what it is, but there's imperfections in it, but it still looks good. You know what it is. And,
yep.
So sometimes being a champion is not clean. It's hard work. It's failure. It's bumps. It's bruises. But when you're still standing at the end of the day, and it's still flowing, right? That flag's flying. That's it. Because you're going to get knocked all around. And right now we're getting knocked around, right? We're getting a pandemic in health, a pandemic civilly, a pandemic financially. We're getting knocked all around. And the champions will keep smiling, keeping their family motivated. They'll keep their business partners motivated. They'll keep their friends motivated.
Totally.
And they'll come out on top.
Yeah, I love that, man. That's so cool. Well, for anyone that wants to get your book, where were we sending them?
I got a nice copy here. It's leavingsixfigures.com.
Okay.
They could just go in there, and if they want any information about the book or they want to order it, they could do it right there at leavingsixfigures.com.
Cool. Awesome. John, thanks, man. It was great to chat with you, and thanks for sharing your story. I mean, I love it. We all have unique stories, and we're all trying to be better every day. At least I know I am. I know you are. So I definitely appreciate your time hanging with me, and I look forward to shaking your hand someday.
Awesome. Appreciate it, man. Have fun. Thanks for having me on.
All right, man. Have a great day. See ya.
Right. God bless.
Bye.
See you later. Bye-bye.